Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Is this recording? I think this is recording. We're gonna try the mic today and see how it works. I am back with another tier ranking video. I've done one on all of the mystery thrillers that I've read. I've done one specifically on Agatha Christie books, and I am now doing fantasy. I will give you a heads up, this video is going to be long because I have 71 books. This is all of the fantasy books that I have read since I started tracking on Goodreads. This is not every fantasy book I've ever read in my life. This is just since I started tracking, and it's still 71 books. So there are a lot of books to get through. I'm not gonna make this intro any longer. Let's start getting into what my tiers are. So my top tier for this video is Part of My Personality, a book that I just am obsessed with. I will reread a million times. This is a book that I'm going to recommend to anyone and everybody who asks. I love these books so much. My second tier is Loved It. Just plain and simple, this is a book that I love, I recommend. It just maybe didn't quite make it up into the books that I'm just absolutely obsessed with. That there might be some caveats, but it's still a really, really good book and I love it. My middle tier is It Did What It Needed To. It didn't blow me away, but it didn't disappoint me. It just was exactly what I expected it to be, and that was exactly what I needed it to be. Underneath that is C's Get Degrees. This is my category for books that would work for some people. And there are definitely people out there that this would be fine for. It just wasn't for me. So books that I could see why people might like them. I could see the type of person who this might be a good book for, but it wasn't the book for me. And then my bottom category is just no. These are books that I just didn't like. Honestly, I probably should have DNF'd them. Okay, let me get the screen recording going and then we will get started. These books I have put down in here, they are in no particular order. I'm gonna kind of pick and choose as we go through. For our first book, let's go ahead and start with a classic. It's the first one on here, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This one I am going to put up in Part of My Personality. I love The Hobbit. I've reread it multiple times. This one is just so good. I think it's just such a fun vibe, such fun characters, such a fun storyline. It's just one that I adore. I hope to read this one again in 2025. I have a very cool illustrated edition of it that I want to read with it. So this one is going to be reread many times in my life, I'm sure. I love The Hobbit. While we're on the topic of J.R.R. Tolkien, let's go ahead and do the main trilogy of The Lord of the Rings. I believe we start with The Fellowship of the Ring. I'm gonna go with Did What It Needed To. And honestly, I think that probably is the same for this whole series. So we're just gonna throw them all in Did What It Needed To. I don't love the main trilogy as much as I love The Hobbit. It's just a little slow, a little long. I think there's parts that get really fun and there's parts of it that I could probably bump up into Loved It, but overall, it just did what it needed to. It's a good high fantasy, but it's not blowing me away or one that I'm gonna go raving about to everybody. Another very popular series, but much more recent, that kind of got viral on the BookTube, BookTok world is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This one, let's see, good to scroll up. I'm gonna go ahead and put in Loved It. I was obsessed with this book. I read it so fast. It was one of those books that you see hyped and it just really lives up to it. I love some of the characters in this first book. I thought it was very fun. There's definitely some tropes and some really predictable parts of the book, but overall I thought it was just a really fun book. I thought the twist at the end was really good. I liked where we were going with the series. I was really interested to read the rest. That being said, the rest of the series I did not love quite so much. I'm even trying to remember I don't even know if I know which book is second and which one's third. I'm trying to look in here. I know which one's the fourth one. I want to say Glass Sword's the second book. I could be wrong. I'm gonna say that one, C's Get Degrees for the next two. Honestly, they're so unmemorable to me that I'm not even sure which one's which. I can't even keep track of it, so I don't know. Really took a dip. It gets very into the romance, and so I can see how some people, if you're like a romantasy fan, I can see how this might be interesting to you, but I am a person who just really, really hates when it becomes so focused on the romance that we're sidetracked from the plot, and there was just a lot of times where I was just like, seriously? Could we get back to the action that is happening on page? And so it just really frustrated me. I also got really annoyed with the dynamic between the two main characters. Now that I'm thinking about it more, I think Glass Sword was a little bit better than King's Cage. One of the brothers I find much more interesting than the other one. What's his name? Maven? Something like that. I find that character much more fascinating than Cal. Is that his name? I don't even know. Honestly, I just don't remember enough about these books to really have a solid opinion. I think that they could work for romantasy fans. They don't work if you're really in it for the plot, because things move really slow and we keep rehashing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And then the fourth book, Warstorm, I will say picked up a little bit for me as far as plot. I really liked where we went with Evangeline's character. I thought she had some very interesting character development. I really liked the princess from the like northern country. I can't remember what it's called, but I thought she was a very intriguing character. I thought they had some really fun ways they used their powers. So there were some things that picked up a bit for me in this book, but overall the ending was a little weird. I thought the motivations behind the Cal character and how he just never really got over the same thing he was struggling with the whole time was just a little bit annoying. So that's what I thought about Red Queen. I loved the first book. The rest of the series was a little bit of a disappointment for me, but I can see how some people could like it. A bit of a less popular series that I haven't seen all over the internet. Let's go with the Far World series next. This is by J. Scott Savage. He's a Utah author. I actually got the first book when I was in elementary school. The author came and did an assembly and I got his book and got it signed at the library afterwards. So I've had that first book for forever. I still have my signed copy, and I think I read the second book when I was a kid, but it was right as he was writing them, and so there was pretty long gaps in between the books coming out, and I just kind of got older and forgot about them, honestly, until I saw them on my parents' shelf, and I decided to go and get the other books and reread the whole series. Far World is probably one in loved it. I think that the world and the characters are just really intriguing. I think the plot is really fun, even as an adult. The magic system is really cool. It's all based in the different elements, and it's just super fun. You're following basically a boy from normal Earth and then a girl from fantasy, the fantasy realm, I guess, and they end up meeting each other under crazy circumstances, and they end up going on a bit of a quest with each other. And then the second book is Landkeep. So it's Waterkeep, Landkeep, and I'm gonna go with loved it on that one as well. I think it's really good. I think it's a fun continuation. You get some more fun characters. Airkeep, I think we'll go with loved it. I do feel like it might slow down a little bit. I don't think I liked the air world quite as much as I liked some of the other ones. And then Firekeep, the last book, is gonna go up into part of my personality. I love where this series goes. I think it's really intriguing. There's some fun plot twists. The third book leaves you on a big cliffhanger, and the fourth one picks up right off of that. It's also one of those books, which I think this is so hard to do, where it has a plot twist in the epilogue of the fourth book, and it changes the entire series. And it's crazy how it's done, but it's not in a way where it feels like things aren't tied up. It just gives you this little piece of information that all of a sudden shifts your perspective on the entire storyline and makes you want to go and reread it, knowing what you know now. And I think it's done so well. And so I would highly recommend this book. It's probably more on the middle grade end of YA, but I would recommend it to everyone. I think it's just a great series. All right, we've done quite a few series, so let's get a standalone in here. Let's go with A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This was the first year in 2024 that I discovered T. Kingfisher, and honestly, I'm kind of obsessed, so you're gonna see me raving about these books. A Wizard's Guide for Defensive Baking is a middle grade one. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I'm gonna go ahead, let's see, and I think I'm gonna put it in part of my personality. So I just think this one was super fun. I love her little quirky, unique characters. I think they're great. Although now that I'm thinking about it, compared to some of the other T. Kingfisher's books that I read this year, it might be more of like a loved it. We'll go with that. It is middle grade. I wouldn't say it's my favorite of her books if I were to rank the ones, so we're gonna put it down there just to leave some room for some of the other ones to go above it. But really cute, has some very interesting, deeper themes around it that I think were done very well for a kid's book, and I think it was very tactfully worked in some of these bigger, heavier topics into a kid's storyline. Also, there's some really fun magical powers in this book, and I think that they were very creative. And then I have a few first books of series that I haven't recently read the rest of the series, so let's go ahead and hit some of those. The first one down here is Theodosia and the Serpents of Chaos. This is a middle grade book. I read it as a kid, and then a couple years ago I went and reread it, and I just haven't gotten to the rest of the series yet. I'm gonna go with this one did what it needed to do. I don't think that this is the most amazing fantasy series ever, and I think that it definitely works more for kids than adults, but it is still a really fun story. It has to do with Egyptian mythology, black magic, and it's a little 11-year-old girl who is removing curses from objects in her parents' Egyptian history museum. So, really fun one. About the same time, I also went and reread the first book in the Alchemist series. What's the name of the series? The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel, or something like that series. This is not the Alchemist that's like the orange one that is really famous, classic. This is a different one. I think this one's also did what it needed to do. I remember the series being a lot better when I was in like middle school reading it, so I don't know if it works as well for adults. I do own the rest of the series, so I need to get around to reading it at some point, but that's where we're at on that. Okay, after all of that, I think I just realized that my mic was not recording this whole time. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put the mic down, and we'll just stick with the audio that we've got going. Clearly don't use the mics that often. I will try that again at some point, and we'll use it on the next one, but this frees up both my hands, so that's fine. One other book that I've recently read the first book of but haven't continued the series is City of Stairs. This is by Robert Jackson Bennett, I believe. I think it's probably right in between C's Get Degrees and did what it needed to do for me. I'm gonna go with C's Get Degrees. It's one that I think could get bumped up depending on where the rest of the series goes. It just is kind of really hard to follow. I did listen to this as an audiobook, which is sometimes rough when you're doing like high fantasy. There's a lot of names to keep track of, a lot of gods, a lot of things going on. There were a couple characters that I just didn't really like, and there was a few scenes that just got a little bit into the spice area, and I just don't do spice in my books, so that all kind of brought it down a little bit. I still haven't decided if I want to continue the series or not, because the second book follows a character that I didn't love so much. So that's where we're at with that one. I think it's C's Get Degrees. One really lengthy series that you're gonna see on here that I have a lot of books from is the Narnia series by C.S. Lewis. I'm not gonna try and get these all in perfect order because there's so many different orders. You could go based off of publication order, you could go based off of chronological order. So I'm not gonna try and do that. We're just gonna pick books at random, I think. So first one that I'm seeing, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That one is probably, I don't know, I loved it for me. I think it's just a classic, it's a good one. This isn't the one that I'm the most obsessed with out of all of them, I think, but I think it's a good one. It's a classic. You can't really go wrong with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Let's see, so these are not covers that I have, so let me see if I can figure out which one's which. The Magician's Nephew, that's the like prequel one. I think that that one's probably it did what it needed to do. I think it's a good prequel. It covers all the bases. It's really fun and magical, but I don't know that it is anything super special in my mind as far as my ranking of the Narnia books. The Silver Chair did what it needed to do. That one's the one that I forget about often. It just doesn't really stick in my brain, so that's why that one's going there. The Last Battle, that's the final one. I'm gonna go with It Did What It Needed to Do. Again, nothing crazy there. I think it's a good one, but it's not mind-blowing. Prince Caspian, I'm gonna go with Loved It. I think that one's just another key fun one, lots of fun characters. The Horse and His Boy is a Loved It. That one's one of my more favorite ones from the series. And then, let's see, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, that one's also good. Again, you've got those Prince Caspian characters. Did I get all the Narnia books? I don't know why it feels like there's one missing, but I think that's all of them. That's my ranking of Narnia, if you were wondering, but none of Narnia is like a part of my personality obsessed series, but overall I really do love Narnia. It's really magical and I've reread it a few times. Mistborn, this one is another very popular series. It's a Brandon Sanderson. I feel like a lot of people start with Mistborn as their first Brandon Sanderson, and I believe that was also my first one. So this is where I started. I always get confused on the order of them, but I want to say the last What is the name of the first one? I'm gonna go with Loved It. I think Mistborn's really well done. Honestly, I think the whole series probably goes in Loved It for me. I wouldn't say that I'm obsessed with it. My husband definitely is, and my dad kind of is too now, but I think that they're really good. It's a really fun, creative magic system. There's a lot of really fun characters. I think that this is a book that does romance well, in that you have a little bit of romance, but it's not overtaking the plot, and there's never really a point where you take a pause from the action in order to do the romance. And so I really appreciate that about Brandon Sanderson. But overall, I would just say Loved It. It's not my favorite Brandon Sanderson book ever, which we'll get to. Another very large series that is taking up quite a bit of space on this is the Sisters Grimm series. This one is a middle grade series based on the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. The first book is the Sisters Grimm. I'm gonna go with Loved It. I think it's a great first start to the series. It's a really fun book with lots of fun characters and just a great setup. All right, I gotta get my phone out to see what the order of these books is because I honestly don't remember. Book 2 is The Unusual Suspects. I'm gonna go with Loved It on that one as well. I think that it is just a solid continuation. You got some more fun storylines. The Problem Child is another Loved It. I think that you have some fun kind of darker things happening that I think is a great tie-in to the original Brothers Grimm vibe of books. Once Upon a Crime, I'm gonna say is one of my less favorite ones. It's just one of those books where you kind of step away from the setting of the original first few of the series and you go like kind of into the big city and I don't know, I don't love it as much. I like the little town feel. My husband just got home from work, so I'm gonna go stop and say hi to him and then I'll come back and start recording again. We're rapidly losing light, so hopefully my camera keeps picking me up pretty good. It seems to be doing all right now, but it is very overcast and it's like 5 o'clock. So hopefully you can still see good and we don't lose too much light. I don't really want to use the overhead lights, but let's just keep going with the Sisters Grimm. The next one is number 5, that's Magic and Other Misdemeanors. I don't even remember a ton about that specific plot, but I'm gonna go with Did What It Needed to Do. Tales from the Hood I think is probably similar. Did What It Needed to Do. I feel like it takes a little bit of a dip in the series, but then it builds back up to the Ever After War, which is one of my favorites of the series. So definitely gonna go in Loved It. I think it takes a dip back down just a little bit with Did What It Needed to Do on number 7 or on number 8, the Inside Story. And then the last one I think jumps back up and I think it was really good. Where did it go? So The Council of Mirrors I think is good. I will say I think the little epilogue where it kind of gives you jump a bunch of time and see kind of how things go for the lives of the kids. It's a little disappointing. I would have liked more of one specific character in the epilogue. Obviously no spoilers, but it kind of is a little bit sad that you don't get more of that character in the epilogue. But if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. I do really love the Sisters Grimms. I think they're super fun, especially if you want a book to read with you and some kids. I think they're a really good option because they're fun, they're unique characters, they've got a good plot, but they're also still kids books. Let's get one in the bottom category. One that is a just no for me is Silver in the Wood. It started out good. It's a very short little, basically novella book. It's like 100-something pages. Really tiny. It starts out really fun, magical. This guy who has magic and can control the forest and stuff like that, but then it takes a turn into like a romance and it's just too short of a book for it to do both a fantasy and a romance. And so I don't know, I just needed to pick one and I think it could have been really solid, but it just didn't work for me when it sidetracked into that because you built up all this stuff and it just completely fell apart because of the romance. And that just really hurts me. So another one that I felt a little bit unhappy with is The Assassin's Apprentice, and I think this is one that is a bit more controversial because I know some people love this series, just live and breathe it. It's by Robin Hobb, but this one's a C's Got Degrees for me. I think I can see how some people would like it. It's very much so a just vibes, no plot type of a book. There is a little bit of a plot at the end, which I did enjoy, but overall it's just way too long, way too slow. for my personal preference. I think it was okay. I started the second book, I ended up DNFing it because it was just too slow. And again, we got sidetracked by romance. So that one's going down there. I can see the appeal for some people. It's just not a book that I enjoy. Another very, very popular book is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I'm gonna go with loved it on this one. I think it was such an interesting world, such a good plot, very fun characters. I love the magic system. The ending of the first book is just wild. I can't believe that they did what they did. And I will say that set up the second book for me to not enjoy it as much. So The Muse of Nightmares, which is book 2, it did what it needed to do. I think it continued the series fun. I think it was interesting how they did it. I don't know if I love where they went after the ending of the first book. I like that it was a duology. It's another one that just got a little too wrapped up in the romance for me. And yeah, so not as good as the first one. The first one was so good. I need to try her other series. The, what is it, Daughter of Smoke and Bone or something like that. Whatever that book series is. I do want to try that at some point, but I'm not like rushing to get to it. Another book that I've only gotten to the first book in the series so far, and this is another Brandon Sanderson. This is Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians. I'm gonna go with Did What It Needed to Do. Definitely a kid's book, and this one's probably one of the more kid-like kid books that I've read. It's very silly, goofy type of a book. I think it's fun. There's a fun magic system. It really is just if you want like a good laugh and a very quick read, you could read it in a couple hours type of a book. So I don't know, nothing special, but it's still good. Okay, and then one of the series that had my most anticipated read for 2024 is Children of Blood and Bone. This first book was definitely a loved it. It took me a while to get into it, but I think that's because I was listening to it on the audiobook, and I just sometimes struggle with audiobooks for YA fantasy specifically. So it took me a while. About halfway through I switched to the physical book, and at that point I got obsessed with it. Reread it, still so good. And then Children of Virtue and Vengeance I think was even better. So that one's gonna go all the way up in Part of My Personality. Obsessed with this book. There's some really fun characters. I like the plot lines. It just is so fast moving. I really, really, really love this book, which is why the third book was my most anticipated release of the year. And unfortunately, that one's gonna be a just no. I just am so frustrated with this one. We take a whole different plot line, totally separate place. All of a sudden the whole rules of the magic system just out the window. We're doing whatever we want now. There was a major character that was one of my favorite characters that just completely disappears. Not even in the book at all. There's one point where the main character goes, huh, I wonder what happened to this person. And then you never find out. So yeah, really, really sad. I'd love to pretend that that book never happened, but that's my thoughts on Children of Blood and Bone series. I have a whole reading vlog if you want to watch me be thoroughly disappointed. You can go watch that reading vlog. A really recent read, City of Bones. This one is obviously a very, very popular series. I decided I needed to try it at some point. So I finally got around to it, and I'm gonna go with loved it. I feel like this one is one that is just feels nostalgic, and that's the best way to describe it. It is just your classic 2010s YA fantasy, and honestly, I don't love that all the time, but this one just really worked for me, and I really need to pick up the rest of the series. Another standalone, let's go back to Brandon Sanderson. This is The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, and this one is gonna go right up at the top. This one is a part of my personality. I'm obsessed with it. I got the stuffed animal of the little Mervin wizard guy. I think this book is just so good, and this is my favorite Brandon Sanderson book by far so far. So I really, really loved it. I think the humor in it is just my type of humor. I wish there were going to be more books in this series. Unfortunately, this one is just a standalone, but I really think he could write another book. So if anybody watching this video agrees, please go spam Brandon Sanderson about it. But I really, really love that. If you want a place to start with Brandon Sanderson and you don't want to dive into a big series, start there. I think it's such a fun book, and that's such a good example of his writing. One book that is maybe questionable on whether it's classified as a fantasy or a mystery thriller. I think I might have put it in the mystery thriller video too, but it's sort of fantasy, it's sort of mystery thriller, and that is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. It is a mystery first and foremost in my opinion, but it's also heavily magical because you have this guy who's waking up in different bodies every single day. So like, It's fantasy too, but it reads more like a mystery book because it is not going to fully describe or explain all of the magic that's happening. It's going to explain the plot and the murder. So 7.5 Deaths of Evil in Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I loved this book. I'm obsessed with it. New favorite author. I really loved it. I listened to the audiobook. I thought it was so good. And then along with that, Devil in the Dark Water is another one of his books. And I'm gonna go with, ooh, it's somewhere in between Part of My Personality and Loved It. You know what, might as well just put it up there. Auto by Author, I need to get to his last book. It comes out in paperback in March, so we'll be getting to that this year, but that one is also one that's kind of mystery, kind of fantasy. I would say that that one's heavier on the fantasy than 7.5 Deaths of Evil in Hardcastle is, so if you want one that's more fantasy but just with a mystery to go along with it, that would be a great one to recommend. We're really losing the lighting here, so really gonna try and speed through these next ones. If my face looks super orange, that's because I'm being lit almost primarily by my computer screen, but it looks better than turning on the overhead light, so we're going with it. Another book, we'll just hit all the ones that are more mystery than they are really fantasy, but that is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This is another one that I just love so much. I don't know where to put it. I think it's gonna have to go up at the top. I feel like this is just such a good one. There's such fun characters. I think this book really solidified her as an auto-buy author for me, that I'm gonna try everything she writes. I know some of it might have some content that I don't love, but this one was just, it's kind of mystery, kind of fantasy, kind of horror, and it just was such a good combination. I loved it. Speaking of which, let's jump into her other one that is her most recent release, A Sorceress Comes to Call. I just barely read this one a week ago, and it's also Part of My Personality. I have been thinking about this book since I finished it. Reading it, I didn't think I was as obsessed with it as I'm now starting to think I was, but the vibes of this book is just exactly what I want, and so now I'm on the hunt for another book that gives me the same feeling that this book does, so it's gonna go right up there at the top. I love it. While we're at it, let's just go ahead and hit the last T. Kingfisher on here, and that is Thornhedge. This is the first one that I read from this author, and I loved it. It was so good. It's gonna be part of my personality. I'm gonna be raving about this book forever. I will always try and find an opportunity to talk about this book because I loved it so much. This is one that I wholeheartedly can recommend to anyone. It's totally clean content-wise. It was just so good. Also, if you hear any noise, my husband is downstairs doing dinner, so sorry if you're hearing noise, but this one's another one that I think is gonna be a just no for me. That's The High Auction by Misbah. I read this one as part of an Around the World in Books challenge. It's a very short one, but really it feels like it's just part of a book. I think that she could have just combined all three of them. I feel like I read the first 120 pages of a book and then just stopped. And I just have not felt the desire to go and read the rest of the series. I don't know, it was just confusing. I don't understand where we're going with it enough to have any desire to keep going. So that's that one. I really wanted to love that one, but I just didn't. Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Ooh, I'm gonna go with just no. I think it was such a good concept and just not what I wanted from that concept. I think you could have done so many interesting things with it, but instead you have an entire book of this girl just sleeping around because that's the only way for her to have somewhere to stay for the night. And that's basically all that they did with it, when you could have done so many interesting things. The last little part of the book, there's like a plot twist kind of a thing that happens, and that's what I wanted the whole story to be, is her just fighting this guy, and it just wasn't. She just like takes it and goes with it, and I just wanted to see her really fighting and digging her heels in, and that just isn't what that book was. Okay, The Lights of Prague. This one's gonna go with loved it. I loved everything except for one scene where it went a little further than what I would consider fade to black. It was just a little too much, but other than that, super atmospheric, so good. The only problem is that one scene, it's vampires in Prague, and it's just so good. But again, that one scene just kind of really took me out of the story. It just blindsided me. I was not prepared for it, and I just didn't want it, and it really brought the book down for me and makes me hesitant to recommend it to everyone. Another series on here is the Shadow and Bone series. This one's another very popular YA trilogy. A lot of people skip this trilogy and just go straight into Six of Crows, which I would not recommend because I actually really enjoyed it. And I think I'm just gonna throw the whole series I can't remember what order they all go in, but I think the whole series was loved it. I got through it pretty quick. I just think the atmosphere is great. I think the characters are good. It does follow a lot of typical YA tropes, except there is a few things that did surprise me. There was a part at the end of the third book that just really shocked me that she actually went there. I was like, oh, we're doing that. I thought we were gonna like stop just before it happened kind of a thing, but no, they really went for it and did it. So yeah, that is Shadow and Bone. I really enjoyed that one. Another middle grade series. If you can tell, I read a lot of middle grade fantasy. I just feel like it gets away from the tropes. So if you're sick of reading the same tropes over and over again in YA, try middle grade. The Books of Umber. This series is another one that I've reread recently. I think the first one I loved it. I think the second one might go and did what it needed to do. And then I think it went back up for the third one with I loved it. So I don't know, they're all good books. I think that it is just super fun, magical world. You get a lot of crazy twists that you wouldn't expect because again, middle grade doesn't always follow the tropes that YA does. So you get some very fun storylines out of this book and just some really unique characters that I just adore. The last full series that I have on here is the Mirror Visitor series. It starts with The Winter's Promise. I read this one while I was in Paris last year, which was just perfect. I really enjoyed this one. I think that one's gonna go in loved it. Obsessed with it. Great start to a series. Such a unique magic system. Such fun characters. The second book, which is The Missing of Claire de Lune, I believe, is gonna go up into Part of My Personality. This really sealed the deal that I was obsessed with these characters. I loved this world, and I wanted to know what was happening with them. It ends on such a cliffhanger, and I was like, seriously? Unfortunately, the next two books go downhill for me a little bit. I think that, ooh, can I remember what order these go in? The Memory of Babel, I don't know. My Goodreads ratings probably don't reflect this 100%. I do think that one went back down to loved it for me. She goes off, the main character goes off kind of on her own, and you're missing a lot of the side characters, and that just really was sad for me because I liked a lot of the side characters. They really added a ton to the story, so that one kind of bummed me out. And then we have A Storm of Echoes, and that one's gonna go back down into did what it needed to do. Really good up until the ending. And then things just went crazy and main characters died and we just didn't address it. We end the whole series off basically where we ended book 2. I was just like, seriously? After all of this, you couldn't come up with a better ending. So I don't know. It's still a series I would recommend. Just know that book 1 and 2 are definitely better than book 3 and 4. Our last Brandon Sanderson book is The Way of Kings. I'm gonna go with did what it needed to do on that one. I feel like it's a great setup for a series and will be very interesting, but it's in of itself a little bit hard to get through. It's a little bit long and a little bit slow. So I don't know. I think that there's potential for some of the other books to be really highly rated books for me, but that one in of itself I think just was about what I expected it to be. Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'm gonna go with, I think it's somewhere in between did what it needed to do and loved it. I'm gonna go with it did what it needed to do. I wouldn't say that this book blew me away necessarily, but I did really enjoy it. So I don't know. It could almost go up and loved it, but it's probably not quite there just because I feel like nothing really blew me away and I don't find myself thinking about these characters very often. So there's that one. These Violent Delights, I'm gonna go with loved it. And I think that Our Violent Ends also probably goes in loved it. I don't know that these ones are quite the best books I've ever read in my life, but they are really good. I really enjoyed them and I definitely want to continue the series. Green Glass House, another really recent finish, another middle grade. I listened to this one as an audiobook and I'm gonna go with loved it on this one too. I think it was just a really fun, solid story. It had a very strong mystery element, which I really love. It was a smuggler's inn, so you get some really unique characters. And it had a plot twist at the end that I was not expecting and I thought was done really well. Last 3 books, 2 of them are part of the Temur series from Naomi Novik that I started this year. Or this past year. His Majesty's Dragon, I'm gonna go with loved it. Throne of Jade, I'm gonna go with did what it needed to do. I still really enjoyed it and it probably could go up and loved it, but I feel like it took a little bit downhill from what the first book was. They go off on their own again and you lose all of those side characters that you kind of developed in the first book, and I just really struggle when books do that because I'm just as attached to the side characters as I am to the main characters. So I kind of hate when they go off on their own. And then our final book, as we are very much so out of light, is The Fisherman King by Katrina Modowd. I read this one for an Around the World in Books video, and honestly, it was so good. I'm gonna go with loved it. I wouldn't say that it's quite my favorite book ever. There are definitely some things that I didn't love as much, and it's more of like a fable type of a book, so it doesn't necessarily have like a super happy conclusive ending. It very much so is more of a here's the moral of the story type of a book. So that's where that one's gonna go. This is my ranking of all of the books, fantasy books, that I have read since I started tracking on Goodreads. So a lot of books. We are very much so out of light in here, but I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want to see more tier ranking videos, what you would like to see me tier rank next. I still have quite a few genres, or we could just do all the other genres. I don't know. Let me know if there's something that you would be interested in seeing me tier ranking. But thank you so much for watching. If you stuck it to the end into the darkness with me, thank you so much. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one very soon. Bye.